Question 1. Assessment of the most effective approach for a safety management specialist to ensure a robust and compliant emergency preparedness and response plan, considering the diverse needs and responsibilities of all involved parties. Option A. Expedite the finalization of the plan by focusing on internal consensus, with minimal external consultation to avoid delays. Option B. Delegate the entire development of the plan to the operations department, relying on their on-site knowledge without broader organizational or external input. Option C. Proactively engage all identified stakeholders, including regulatory bodies, local emergency services, and internal departments, to collaboratively develop and review the emergency preparedness and response plan. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive internal technical review of the plan by the safety department, assuming external agencies will adapt to the established procedures. The correct answer is C. Proactively engage all identified stakeholders, including regulatory bodies, local emergency services, and internal departments, to collaboratively develop and review the emergency preparedness and response plan. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for effective emergency response with the long-term implications of stakeholder engagement and regulatory compliance. A safety management specialist must not only understand the technical aspects of emergency preparedness, but also the human and organizational factors involved. The challenge lies in ensuring that the response plan is robust, practical, and has the buy-in of all relevant parties, which is crucial for its successful implementation during a crisis. The correct approach involves proactively engaging all identified stakeholders, including regulatory bodies, local emergency services, and internal departments, to collaboratively develop and review the emergency preparedness and response plan. This approach is right because it aligns with the fundamental principles of effective safety management, which emphasize a holistic and inclusive process. Specifically, under the framework of the Safety Management Specialist (SMS) role, regulatory requirements often mandate consultation and coordination with relevant authorities and stakeholders to ensure that emergency plans are comprehensive and feasible. Ethical considerations also dictate that those who will be involved in or affected by the response should have a voice in its development. This collaborative method fosters shared responsibility, improves the plan's realism by incorporating diverse perspectives and resources, and ensures that all parties are aware of their roles and responsibilities, thereby enhancing overall organizational resilience. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on internal technical review without external stakeholder input fails to meet regulatory expectations for coordinated emergency response. Many regulatory frameworks require demonstration of consultation with external agencies like fire departments or environmental protection bodies. This oversight can lead to a plan that is technically sound but impractical in execution due to a lack of understanding or support from external responders. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of plan finalization over thorough stakeholder consultation overlooks the critical need for buy-in and operational integration. While speed is important in emergencies, a rushed process that alienates key stakeholders can result in confusion, conflicting actions, or a lack of necessary support during an actual event, directly contravening the spirit and often the letter of regulatory requirements for effective emergency preparedness. A third incorrect approach that delegates the entire development to a single department without broader consultation, even if that department has expertise, is also flawed. This siloed approach can lead to blind spots regarding the operational realities and resource constraints of other departments or external partners. Regulatory guidance for SMS roles typically emphasizes cross-functional collaboration to ensure that all aspects of an emergency are considered, from immediate containment to long-term recovery and communication. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, identify all relevant internal and external stakeholders. Second, establish clear communication channels and a timeline for consultation. Third, actively solicit feedback and incorporate it into the plan, documenting the rationale for any feedback not incorporated. Fourth, conduct regular reviews and drills involving stakeholders to validate the plan and identify areas for improvement. This iterative and collaborative process ensures that the emergency preparedness and response plan is not just a document, but a living, effective system supported by all parties. Question 2. Upon reviewing the initial implementation phase of a new flight scheduling system, a safety management specialist, SMS, identifies several potential hazards related to crew fatigue due to complex rostering patterns. The organization is under pressure to launch the system quickly to meet market demands. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of effective safety management and regulatory expectations for hazard identification, risk assessment, and control measures? Option A. Implement immediate, albeit informal, adjustments to the rostering patterns based on the initial concerns raised by a few senior pilots, without a formal risk assessment or documentation. Option B. Rely primarily on the historical incident data from previous scheduling systems to identify potential fatigue hazards, assuming the new system will not introduce significantly different risks. Option C. Conduct a thorough hazard identification and risk assessment process, documenting all identified hazards, their associated risks, and the proposed control measures, prioritizing those with the highest risk levels, even if it causes a slight delay in the system launch. Option D. Proceed with the system launch as scheduled, deferring the detailed hazard identification and risk assessment for fatigue until after the system has been operational for a period and initial feedback is received. Correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough hazard identification and risk assessment process, documenting all identified hazards, their associated risks, and the proposed control measures, prioritizing those with the highest risk levels, even if it causes a slight delay in the system launch. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in safety management, balancing the need for robust hazard identification and risk assessment with the practical constraints of resource availability and operational urgency. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that the safety management system, SMS, effectively addresses potential hazards without unduly impeding necessary business operations. Careful judgment is required to prioritize risks and implement controls that are both effective and proportionate. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process for hazard identification, risk assessment, and the development of appropriate control measures, all aligned with the organization's safety policy and objectives. This approach ensures that potential safety deficiencies are proactively identified and managed before they can lead to incidents. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing aviation safety, e.g., ICAO Annex 19, relevant National Aviation Authority regulations, mandate a proactive and systematic approach to safety management, emphasizing the need for a robust hazard identification and risk management process. Ethically, it is incumbent upon safety professionals to ensure the safety of all individuals involved in or affected by the organization's operations. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on historical incident data for hazard identification. While historical data is valuable, it is inherently reactive and may not capture emerging or novel hazards. This fails to meet the proactive requirements of most safety management regulations and can lead to a false sense of security. Another incorrect approach is to implement control measures based on anecdotal evidence or personal opinion without a formal risk assessment. This lacks the rigor required by safety management standards and can result in ineffective or disproportionate controls, wasting resources and potentially leaving significant risks unmitigated. Finally, neglecting to document the hazard identification, risk assessment, and control measure selection process is a significant failure. Regulatory oversight and internal audits rely on documented evidence to verify compliance and the effectiveness of the SMS. Without documentation, the organization cannot demonstrate due diligence or learn from its safety processes. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the scope of the hazard identification and risk assessment. Second, employ a variety of methods for hazard identification, e.g., checklists, walkthroughs, incident investigations, employee feedback. Third, conduct a formal risk assessment using a recognized methodology to evaluate the likelihood and severity of identified hazards. Fourth, develop and prioritize control measures based on the risk assessment findings, considering the hierarchy of controls. Fifth, ensure all steps are thoroughly documented and communicated. Finally, regularly review and update the hazard register and risk assessments to ensure their continued relevance and effectiveness. Question 3. Benchmark analysis indicates that a company's safety management system has been operating with a perceived level of effectiveness for several years. However, A recent internal audit has revealed potential discrepancies between current operational practices and the detailed requirements of the applicable regulatory framework. The safety management specialist is tasked with recommending the most appropriate course of action to ensure absolute priority is given to legal and regulatory compliance. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of regulatory compliance for a safety management specialist? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entire safety management system, comparing each component against the specific clauses and requirements of the governing regulatory framework, and develop a detailed remediation plan for any identified noncompliance. Option B. Expedite operational processes to meet business targets, while making minor, ad hoc adjustments to safety procedures as needed to address any immediate concerns raised by the audit. Option C. Implement additional safety initiatives that are generally considered best practice in the industry, assuming these will inherently satisfy regulatory obligations. Option D. Rely on the recommendations of an external safety consultant to update the system, without independently verifying the specific regulatory applicability of their proposed changes. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entire safety management system, comparing each component against the specific clauses and requirements of the governing regulatory framework, and develop a detailed remediation plan for any identified noncompliance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between operational efficiency and the stringent requirements of the regulatory framework governing safety management systems. The safety management specialist, SMS, must navigate the complexities of legal obligations, ensuring that all implemented safety measures not only meet but exceed the minimum standards set by the relevant authority. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying these regulations accurately in a dynamic operational environment, where potential conflicts between immediate business needs and long-term safety compliance can arise. Careful judgment is required to prioritize safety obligations, even when faced with pressure to expedite processes or reduce costs. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the organization's existing safety management system against the specific requirements of the relevant regulatory framework. This includes identifying any gaps or non-compliance issues and developing a detailed action plan for remediation. The justification for this approach is rooted in the absolute priority of regulatory compliance. The safety management specialist has a professional and ethical duty to ensure the organization operates within the legal boundaries established by the governing body. Failure to do so can result in severe penalties, including fines, operational shutdowns, and reputational damage, in addition to compromising the safety of individuals and the environment. This proactive and systematic approach ensures that the organization's safety performance is not only compliant, but also robust and sustainable. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that focuses solely on implementing safety measures that are perceived as good practice, without direct reference to the specific regulatory framework, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the absolute priority requirement because it relies on subjective interpretation rather than objective legal mandates. While good practice may align with regulations, it does not guarantee compliance. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize operational expediency over regulatory requirements, assuming that minor deviations will be overlooked. This is a critical regulatory and ethical failure. The regulatory framework is designed to be strictly adhered to, and any deviation, however minor, can be interpreted as non-compliance, leading to the aforementioned penalties. It demonstrates a disregard for the legal obligations and the underlying safety principles. Finally, an approach that relies on the advice of external consultants without independently verifying the regulatory compliance of their recommendations against the specific framework, also professionally deficient. While consultants can offer valuable expertise, the ultimate responsibility for regulatory compliance rests with the organization and its SMS. This approach outsources a core responsibility and risks adopting recommendations that may not fully align with the precise legal obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in safety management must adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach to regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the specific legal and regulatory framework applicable to their operations. 2. Conducting regular audits and assessments to identify compliance gaps. 3. Developing and implementing corrective action plans with clear timelines and responsibilities. 4. Maintaining comprehensive documentation to demonstrate compliance. 5. Staying updated on changes to the regulatory landscape. 6. Fostering a culture of safety where compliance is seen as a fundamental operational requirement, not an optional add-on. Question 4. Performance analysis shows a recurring minor deviation in a specific operational procedure, leading to a slight increase in reported near misses. A team member proposes a significant procedural overhaul, which, if successful, is projected to eliminate these near misses. However, implementing this overhaul would require substantial retraining of all operational staff and a complete revision of the operations manual, consuming significant resources and time. The safety manager must decide how to proceed. Option A. Immediately implement the proposed procedural overhaul, prioritizing the elimination of near misses and assuming the benefits will outweigh the implementation costs. Option B. Initiate a formal change management process to thoroughly assess the proposed procedural overhaul, including its potential risks, benefits, resource implications, and impact on the overall SMS before any implementation. Option C. Dismiss the proposed overhaul due to the significant resource and time commitment, and instruct the team to focus on minor adjustments to the existing procedure. Option D. Implement the proposed overhaul on a trial basis in a limited scope without a formal risk assessment or comprehensive retraining to gauge its effectiveness quickly. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal change management process to thoroughly assess the proposed procedural overhaul, including its potential risks, benefits, resource implications, and impact on the overall SMS before any implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in safety management systems, SMS, implementation, balancing the need for continuous improvement with the practical constraints of resource allocation and established procedures. The professional challenge lies in making a decision that upholds the integrity of the SMS while remaining pragmatic and compliant with regulatory expectations. A robust SMS requires proactive identification and mitigation of risks, but also necessitates a structured and evidence-based approach to change management. The correct approach involves a thorough review and validation of the proposed changes against the existing SMS framework and relevant regulatory requirements. This ensures that any modifications are not only effective in addressing the identified performance gap, but also integrated seamlessly into the system without introducing new risks or compromising existing safety controls. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing aviation safety management, mandate a systematic process for managing change within an SMS. This includes assessing the impact of proposed changes on safety, ensuring adequate resources are available, and updating relevant documentation and training. Ethical considerations also demand that decisions prioritize safety and do not lead to a degradation of the safety performance. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement the proposed changes without a formal assessment. This bypasses critical risk assessment and validation steps, potentially leading to unintended consequences, such as the introduction of new hazards or the ineffectiveness of the proposed solution. This failure to follow a structured change management process directly contravenes the principles of a proactive SMS and the regulatory requirement for systematic risk management. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the proposed changes solely based on the effort required for implementation, without a proper evaluation of their potential safety benefits. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to continuous improvement and a failure to adequately address identified performance deficiencies, which is a violation of the proactive safety culture expected within an SMS. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a systematic, evidence-based, and risk-informed approach. This involves 1. Clearly defining the performance gap and the proposed solution. 2. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment of the proposed changes, considering their impact on all aspects of the SMS. 3. Evaluating the feasibility and resource implications of the proposed changes. 4. Consulting relevant stakeholders and subject matter experts. 5. Making a decision based on the risk assessment, feasibility, and potential safety benefits, ensuring alignment with regulatory requirements and organizational safety objectives. Question 5. Implementation of a new process at a manufacturing facility requires a thorough severity, likelihood, and exposure assessment for potential safety risks. The safety manager is considering different approaches to gather input from various groups, which approach best aligns with regulatory expectations and ethical best practices for a comprehensive risk assessment. Option A. Focus the assessment on risks that have historically resulted in reported incidents, as these are the most demonstrably severe. Option B. Primarily rely on the input of the engineering department, as they have the technical expertise to quantify potential consequences. Option C. Conduct a series of workshops involving frontline operators, maintenance staff, supervisors, and senior management to collectively identify and rate risks based on their direct experience and oversight. Option D. Delegate the assessment to an external safety consultant, who will conduct an independent review based on industry benchmarks. The correct answer is B. Primarily rely on the input of the engineering department, as they have the technical expertise to quantify potential consequences. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the diverse perspectives and priorities of different stakeholders when assessing the severity, likelihood, and exposure of a safety risk. Each stakeholder group, from frontline workers to senior management and external regulators, will have unique insights and concerns that influence their perception of risk. A failure to adequately consider these varied viewpoints can lead to an incomplete or inaccurate risk assessment, potentially resulting in ineffective control measures and continued exposure to unacceptable hazards. The challenge lies in synthesizing these potentially conflicting views into a unified and defensible risk profile. The correct approach involves actively engaging all relevant stakeholders in the risk assessment process, ensuring their input on severity, likelihood, and exposure is systematically gathered and considered. This collaborative method aligns with the principles of proactive safety management, which emphasizes a holistic understanding of risks derived from those most familiar with the operational environment. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing workplace safety, often mandate or strongly encourage stakeholder consultation to ensure that risk assessments are comprehensive and reflect the reality of operational hazards. Ethically, it is imperative to involve those who bear the brunt of potential harm in the decision-making process that aims to protect them. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the perspective of senior management fails to capture the granular details of operational risks that frontline workers experience daily. This can lead to underestimation of severity or likelihood, because management may lack direct exposure to the specific conditions that create hazards. Regulatory failure here lies in potentially not meeting requirements for worker consultation and participation in safety matters. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes only the most easily quantifiable risks, ignoring qualitative but significant factors, overlooks the complexity of safety and can lead to a skewed perception of risk. This may violate the spirit of regulations that require a thorough and systematic approach to hazard identification and risk assessment, even for less tangible risks. An approach that dismisses concerns raised by external bodies without thorough investigation risks noncompliance with regulatory oversight and a failure to address potential systemic issues. Professional reasoning in such situations requires a structured approach. First, identify all relevant stakeholder groups and their potential influence on or exposure to the risk. Second, establish clear communication channels and methods for gathering input from each group regarding severity, likelihood, and exposure. Third, critically evaluate all input, seeking to understand the rationale behind differing perspectives. Fourth, synthesize this information into a comprehensive risk assessment, documenting the process and the justification for the final assessment. Finally, communicate the findings and proposed control measures back to stakeholders, fostering transparency and continuous improvement. Question 6. Which approach would be most effective for a safety management specialist to evaluate the overall performance of the organization's safety management system, considering the diverse perspectives of all involved parties and adhering to UK regulatory frameworks? Option A. An evaluation focused exclusively on the organization's adherence to documented safety procedures and administrative checklists. Option B. A comprehensive evaluation integrating data from incident and near-miss reporting, safety audits, direct observation of work practices, and feedback from frontline employees and management. Option C. An evaluation derived solely from the feedback and assessments provided by senior management regarding safety culture and compliance. Option D. An evaluation based primarily on the number of reported safety incidents and lost time injuries over the past year. Correct answer is B. A comprehensive evaluation integrating data from incident and near-miss reporting, safety audits, direct observation of work practices, and feedback from frontline employees and management. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for objective performance evaluation with the diverse perspectives and potential biases of various stakeholders. A safety management specialist, SMS, must ensure that performance metrics accurately reflect safety outcomes and contribute to continuous improvement, rather than simply satisfying individual or departmental agendas. Careful judgment is required to select an evaluation method that is comprehensive, fair, and aligned with the organization's safety objectives and regulatory requirements. The correct approach involves a multifaceted evaluation that integrates data from various sources, including direct observation, incident reporting analysis, and feedback from frontline staff and management. This approach is right because it provides a holistic view of safety performance, acknowledging that safety is a shared responsibility and that different stakeholders have unique insights. Regulatory frameworks for safety management, such as those promulgated by the Health and Safety Executive, HSE in the UK, emphasize the importance of proactive monitoring, incident investigation, and worker involvement in safety processes. An evaluation that incorporates these elements directly supports the principles of a robust safety management system, fostering a culture of safety and enabling targeted interventions for improvement. An approach that relies solely on reported incident rates is professionally unacceptable because it is reactive and may not capture near misses or unsafe behaviors that have not yet resulted in an incident. This fails to meet the proactive monitoring requirements often stipulated by safety regulations, which aim to prevent incidents before they occur. Furthermore, it can lead to underreporting if staff fear reprisal. An approach that focuses exclusively on management's perception of safety is also professionally unacceptable. While management oversight is crucial, their perspective may be detached from the day-to-day realities faced by frontline workers. This can lead to an inaccurate assessment of risks and the effectiveness of safety controls, potentially overlooking critical issues that only those directly involved in operations can identify. This approach neglects the ethical imperative to consider the well-being and input of all personnel. An approach that prioritizes compliance with administrative procedures over actual safety outcomes is professionally unacceptable. While adherence to procedures is important, it is a means to an end, not the end itself. Focusing solely on paperwork can create a false sense of security, masking underlying systemic weaknesses in safety performance. This approach fails to align with the overarching goal of safety management, which is to prevent harm and ensure a safe working environment, as mandated by regulatory bodies. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of the organization's safety policy, relevant regulatory requirements, and the specific context of operations. The SMS should identify key performance indicators, KPI, that are measurable, relevant, and aligned with safety objectives. Gathering input from a diverse range of stakeholders, including frontline workers, supervisors, and management, is essential to ensure a balanced and accurate evaluation. The chosen evaluation method should be transparent, communicated to all relevant parties, and used to drive continuous improvement in the safety management system. Question 7. The analysis reveals that a U.S.-based aviation organization's newly implemented safety management system, SMS, is encountering significant operational friction within its maintenance department, with technicians reporting that certain procedures are time-consuming and hinder their ability to meet operational deadlines, leading to a noticeable dip in morale and a subtle increase in minor procedural deviations. The SMS was designed to align with FAA guidelines, considering the critical need for both robust safety and operational efficiency. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the safety manager? Option A. Immediately suspend the implementation of the most contentious SMS procedures within the maintenance department until a comprehensive external audit can be conducted to validate their safety effectiveness and operational feasibility. Option B. Issue a directive reinforcing the mandatory adherence to all current SMS procedures, emphasizing the paramount importance of safety over operational speed, and schedule a general refresher training session on the SMS's core principles for the entire maintenance department. Option C. Implement a new, simplified set of safety guidelines specifically for the maintenance department that bypasses some of the more complex elements of the existing SMS, with the understanding that these will be reviewed at a later date. Option D. Initiate a collaborative review of the specific maintenance procedures flagged by the technicians, involving both SMS personnel and maintenance staff, to identify areas for efficiency improvements that do not compromise safety standards, and subsequently revise the SMS documentation and training accordingly. The correct answer is D. Initiate a collaborative review of the specific maintenance procedures flagged by the technicians, involving both SMS personnel and maintenance staff, to identify areas for efficiency improvements that do not compromise safety standards, and subsequently revise the SMS documentation and training accordingly. Explanation: the analysis reveals a scenario where a newly implemented safety management system, SMS, within a U.S.-based aviation organization is facing resistance from a specific department due to perceived inefficiencies. This presents a professionally challenging situation because effective SMS implementation requires buy-in and active participation from all levels and departments. The challenge lies in balancing the need for robust safety protocols with operational realities and employee concerns, ensuring that the SMS is not just a documented system, but a living, breathing part of the organizational culture. Careful judgment is required to address the resistance without compromising safety standards or alienating personnel. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the SMS's operational impact on the resistant department, gathering specific feedback, and collaboratively identifying and implementing necessary adjustments to improve efficiency while maintaining safety integrity. This approach is right because it directly addresses the root cause of the resistance by acknowledging employee concerns and seeking practical solutions. It aligns with the principles of a proactive and adaptive SMS, as mandated by U.S. Federal Aviation Administration (FAA) regulations, which emphasize continuous improvement and the integration of safety into all aspects of operations. This method fosters trust and encourages a shared responsibility for safety, which is crucial for long-term SMS success. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the department's concerns as mere resistance to change and to enforce the existing SMS protocols without further investigation or modification. This failure stems from a lack of engagement with frontline personnel and an unwillingness to adapt the system to operational realities. Ethically, it disregards the well-being and input of employees, potentially leading to covert noncompliance or a decline in morale, which can indirectly impact safety. Regulatory failure occurs because a rigid, unyielding SMS does not meet the spirit or intent of FAA requirements for a dynamic and responsive safety culture. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately suspend or significantly alter the SMS in the affected department based solely on the initial complaints, without a thorough analysis of the feedback or the potential safety implications of such changes. This demonstrates a reactive rather than proactive safety management style. It risks undermining the established safety framework and could set a precedent for future resistance, eroding the overall effectiveness of the SMS. This approach fails to uphold the principle of data-driven decision-making and could lead to a compromise of safety standards without proper justification or risk assessment. A third incorrect approach would be to implement a superficial training program on the existing SMS without addressing the specific operational concerns raised by the department. While training is a component of SMS, its effectiveness is diminished if it does not tackle the underlying issues causing resistance. This approach treats the symptom, resistance, rather than the cause, perceived inefficiency. It is a failure to engage in meaningful dialogue and problem-solving, which are essential for successful SMS integration. Ethically, it can be seen as a perfunctory effort to meet compliance requirements without genuine commitment to improving the system or supporting the employees. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, actively listen to and document all concerns raised by personnel. Second, conduct a thorough analysis of the feedback, correlating it with operational data and safety performance indicators. Third, engage in collaborative problem-solving with the affected department to identify practical and safe solutions. Fourth, implement agreed-upon adjustments and monitor their effectiveness, ensuring that safety standards are maintained or enhanced. Finally, communicate the outcomes and reinforce the value of the SMS and employee contributions to safety. Question 8. Governance review demonstrates that a recent failure mode and effects analysis (FME) for a critical operational process has identified a potential failure mode with a high-risk priority number RPN, indicating a significant potential for harm. The SMS is aware that addressing this finding will require a temporary disruption to service delivery. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the safety management specialist? Option A. Dismiss the FME finding as a theoretical possibility with a low likelihood of occurrence and proceed with normal operations without further investigation. Option B. Escalate the identified high-risk failure mode to the relevant safety review board or designated authority for a comprehensive risk assessment and the development of appropriate mitigation strategies. Option C. Implement a minor, easily achievable control measure based on personal judgment to mitigate the risk, without formal approval to maintain operational continuity. Option D. Document the finding in the FME report and defer any corrective actions until the next scheduled operational review cycle to avoid service disruption. The correct answer is B. Escalate the identified high-risk failure mode to the relevant safety review board or designated authority for a comprehensive risk assessment and the development of appropriate mitigation strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the safety management specialist, SMS, to balance the immediate need for operational continuity with the imperative to thoroughly investigate potential safety hazards identified through a failure mode and effects analysis, FME. The pressure to maintain service delivery can lead to overlooking or downplaying critical findings, which directly contravenes the SMS's ethical and regulatory obligations. The core challenge lies in prioritizing safety assurance over short-term operational expediency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the identified high-risk failure mode to the relevant safety review board or designated authority for a comprehensive risk assessment and the development of appropriate mitigation strategies. This aligns with the fundamental principles of proactive safety management, which mandate that identified hazards, particularly those with high severity and occurrence ratings, as implied by a significant FME finding, must be addressed before operations proceed or continue without adequate controls. Regulatory frameworks for safety management typically require a structured process for hazard identification, risk assessment, and the implementation of control measures. This approach ensures that the FME findings are not merely documented, but are acted upon through established safety governance processes, thereby fulfilling the SMS's duty to prevent foreseeable harm and maintain regulatory compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that involves documenting the finding but deferring any action until the next scheduled review cycle is professionally unacceptable because it represents a failure to act on a known, potentially high-risk hazard. This passive approach ignores the proactive nature of safety management and the regulatory expectation to address significant risks promptly. It creates a gap in safety assurance, leaving the operation vulnerable to the identified failure mode. An approach that involves implementing a minor, superficial control without a formal risk assessment or the approval of the safety review board is also professionally unacceptable. This bypasses established safety governance procedures, potentially leading to inadequate mitigation or the introduction of new, unforeseen risks. It undermines the integrity of the FME process and the organization's safety management system by allowing ad hoc decision-making on critical safety matters. An approach that involves dismissing the FME finding as a low-probability event without further investigation or consultation with the safety review board is professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a failure to properly interpret and act upon the results of a systematic hazard analysis. The FME purpose is to identify potential failures, and a high-risk rating, regardless of perceived probability, warrants rigorous scrutiny and a formal decision-making process involving relevant safety authorities. This approach risks complacency and a failure to meet the duty of care. Professional reasoning. Professionals in safety management must adopt a systematic and risk-based approach. When an FME identifies a high-risk failure mode, the decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the severity and likelihood ratings assigned in the FME. 2. Consulting relevant organizational safety policies and procedures, as well as applicable regulatory requirements. 3. Escalating the finding to the appropriate safety governance body for a formal risk assessment and decision on mitigation. and 4. Ensuring that any implemented controls are effective and validated. This structured process ensures that safety decisions are informed, documented, and aligned with both regulatory mandates and ethical responsibilities. Question 9. Operational review demonstrates that the organization has historically managed safety through a compliance-focused approach, primarily reacting to regulatory requirements. The company is now seeking to adopt a more proactive, risk-based safety management system by integrating an internationally recognized standard. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of establishing an effective international safety management system? Option A. Immediately adopt the international standards documentation and templates, assuming they will automatically improve safety performance. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive gap analysis against the chosen international standard, develop tailored training programs, create documented procedures aligned with the standard, and establish a system for ongoing monitoring and review. Option C. Assign the entire responsibility for implementing the international standard to the safety department, with minimal involvement from other operational areas or senior management. Option D. Implement selected elements of the international standard that appear most critical, without a full assessment of organizational needs or a structured implementation plan. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive gap analysis against the chosen international standard, develop tailored training programs, create documented procedures aligned with the standard, and establish a system for ongoing monitoring and review. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the safety management specialist, SMS, to navigate the complexities of implementing a safety management system, SMS, in an organization that has historically relied on a less formalized, compliance-driven approach. The challenge lies in bridging the gap between a reactive, rule-following mindset and a proactive, risk-based safety culture, especially when international standards are being introduced. The SMS must not only understand the technical requirements of these standards, but also the organizational change management aspects necessary for their effective adoption. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for robust safety practices with the practical realities of the organization's current capabilities and culture. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of the chosen international standard, starting with a comprehensive gap analysis against the standard's requirements. This allows for the identification of specific areas where the organization's current practices fall short. Following this, a tailored training program should be developed and delivered to all relevant personnel, focusing on the principles and practical application of the standard. Crucially, the organization must then develop and document new procedures and policies that align with the standard, supported by a clear communication strategy to foster buy-in and understanding. Regular audits and reviews are essential to monitor progress and ensure continuous improvement. This approach is justified by the fundamental principles of effective SMS implementation, which emphasize a systematic, risk-based, and data-driven methodology. International standards like ISO 45001, Occupational Health and Safety Management Systems, or ICAO Annex 19 Safety Management, provide a structured framework for achieving this, promoting a proactive safety culture and reducing the likelihood of incidents. An incorrect approach would be to simply adopt the international standards documentation without a thorough understanding of its underlying principles or the organization's specific context. This superficial adoption fails to address the root causes of any existing safety deficiencies and is unlikely to lead to meaningful improvements in safety performance. It represents a failure to engage with the spirit of the standard, focusing on form over substance. Another incorrect approach would be to implement the standard in a piecemeal fashion, addressing only the most obvious compliance gaps without a holistic view of the SMS. This fragmented approach neglects the interconnectedness of safety management elements and can lead to inconsistencies and inefficiencies, ultimately undermining the effectiveness of the entire system. It fails to establish a coherent and integrated safety management framework. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire implementation process to a single department or individual without adequate cross-functional involvement and senior management commitment. This lack of broad engagement and leadership support can result in resistance to change, a lack of ownership, and ultimately, the failure of the SMS to become embedded within the organizational culture. It overlooks the critical role of leadership and shared responsibility in driving safety performance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach, First, thoroughly understanding the organization's current safety performance and culture. Second, carefully selecting an appropriate international standard that aligns with the organization's needs and objectives. Third, conducting a detailed gap analysis. Fourth, developing a phased implementation plan that includes training, documentation, and communication. And finally, establishing robust monitoring and review mechanisms for continuous improvement. This process emphasizes a proactive, integrated, and culturally sensitive approach to safety management. Question 10. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new digital platform for immediate safety alerts and a secure, searchable online portal for all safety documentation offers significant advantages in terms of incident reduction and regulatory compliance. However, a proposal suggests that for routine safety updates and procedural changes, relying solely on email notifications to all staff, followed by a brief mention in the next all-hands meeting, will be more cost-effective and faster, which approach best aligns with the principles of effective safety communication and regulatory compliance for a safety management specialist, SMS. Option A. Prioritize the speed of information dissemination above all else, even if it means compromising on the completeness or accuracy of the safety information being communicated. Option B. Implement a multi-channel communication strategy that includes immediate digital alerts for critical information and a centralized, accessible online portal for all safety documentation, while also ensuring routine updates are communicated through appropriate channels that allow for confirmation of understanding and record keeping. Option C. Rely solely on email notifications for routine safety updates and procedural changes, supplemented by brief mentions in all-hands meetings to minimize costs and maximize speed. Option D. Utilize a single, highly technical digital platform for all safety communications, assuming all personnel will adapt to its interface and information structure. The correct answer is B. Implement a multi-channel communication strategy that includes immediate digital alerts for critical information and a centralized, accessible online portal for all safety documentation, while also ensuring routine updates are communicated through appropriate channels that allow for confirmation of understanding and record keeping. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information dissemination with the long-term implications of information accuracy and accessibility within a regulated environment. A safety management specialist, SMS, must ensure that communication channels are not only efficient but also compliant with established safety protocols and regulatory requirements. The core of the challenge lies in selecting a communication method that is both effective for conveying critical safety information and adheres to the principles of information management and regulatory oversight. The correct approach involves utilizing a multi-channel communication strategy that leverages both digital platforms for immediate dissemination and a centralized, accessible repository for comprehensive record-keeping and future reference. This aligns with regulatory expectations for robust safety management systems, which mandate clear, accurate, and retrievable safety information. Specifically, regulations often require documented communication of safety procedures and incident findings, ensuring that all relevant personnel are informed and that there is a traceable record of information flow. This approach prioritizes both timeliness and the integrity of safety information, fostering a culture of continuous improvement and accountability. An incorrect approach that relies solely on informal, ad hoc communication methods fails to meet regulatory requirements for documentation and traceability. Such methods often lack a formal record, making it difficult to prove that information was disseminated effectively or to audit communication practices. This can lead to non-compliance, increased risk of incidents due to misinformation or lack of awareness, and challenges in investigations. Another incorrect approach that focuses exclusively on a single, highly technical communication channel, while potentially efficient for a niche audience, overlooks the broader need for accessibility and understanding across all levels of the organization. Safety information must be communicated in a manner that is comprehensible to all affected personnel, regardless of their technical expertise. Regulations emphasize clear and understandable communication to ensure effective safety practices. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy or completeness would be detrimental. In safety management, the integrity of information is paramount. Disseminating incomplete or inaccurate safety information, even if done rapidly, can lead to severe consequences, including accidents and regulatory penalties. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic evaluation of communication options against regulatory mandates, organizational safety policies, and the diverse needs of the workforce. The process should involve assessing the clarity, accuracy, accessibility, timeliness, and retrievability of the information, ensuring that the chosen method supports the overall safety objectives and complies with all applicable legal and ethical standards. Question 11. Strategic planning requires a safety management specialist, SMS, to ensure that all new operational procedures undergo a thorough hazard identification and risk assessment HERA process. Given a tight project deadline, what is the most appropriate regulatory compliant approach for the SMS to adopt? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive documented HERA involving relevant personnel and obtain formal approval before commencing operations, even if it necessitates a slight adjustment to the project timeline. Option B. Proceed with operations as scheduled, relying on the informal experience of the project team to manage any emergent risks and document potential hazards retrospectively. Option C. Initiate operations immediately and defer the HERA process until after the project's initial phase, focusing solely on immediate task completion. Option D. Prioritize operational commencement and conduct a brief, informal review of the most obvious potential hazards, assuming less apparent risks are unlikely to materialize. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive, documented HERA involving relevant personnel and obtain formal approval before commencing operations, even if it necessitates a slight adjustment to the project timeline. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a safety management specialist, SMS, to balance the immediate need for operational efficiency with the fundamental requirement of robust hazard identification and risk assessment HERA, as mandated by regulatory frameworks. The pressure to deliver a project quickly can lead to shortcuts in safety processes, which, if not managed correctly, can have severe consequences. Careful judgment is required to ensure that safety is not compromised for expediency, adhering strictly to the established regulatory requirements for HERA. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process for identifying hazards, assessing their associated risks, and implementing appropriate control measures before commencing operations. This aligns with the core principles of safety management systems, which are designed to proactively prevent incidents. Specifically, it requires the SMS to ensure that a comprehensive HERA is completed and approved, incorporating input from relevant stakeholders and considering all potential operational phases and foreseeable scenarios. This proactive stance is ethically imperative to protect workers and the public, and it is legally mandated by regulations that require demonstrable due diligence in safety management. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate operational commencement without a completed HERA fails to meet regulatory obligations. This bypasses the essential step of understanding and mitigating potential dangers, directly violating the spirit and letter of safety legislation that mandates risk assessment prior to undertaking hazardous activities. Such an approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and can lead to significant legal liabilities and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on the experience of senior personnel without a formal, documented HERA process, while potentially drawing on valuable knowledge, is insufficient from a regulatory compliance standpoint. Regulations typically require documented evidence of risk assessment, not just informal reliance on expertise. This can lead to inconsistencies, a lack of auditable trails, and the potential for overlooking specific hazards that a structured methodology might uncover. A third incorrect approach that focuses on identifying only the most obvious hazards, neglecting less apparent but potentially severe risks, also falls short. Effective HERA requires a comprehensive and systematic review that considers a wide range of potential hazards, including those that are not immediately evident. Regulatory expectations demand a thoroughness that goes beyond superficial identification to ensure all reasonably foreseeable risks are addressed. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, a commitment to the principles of proactive safety management, and the ability to communicate the importance of HERA to all stakeholders, including management. When faced with pressure to expedite operations, the SMS must advocate for the necessary time and resources to conduct a thorough HERA, escalating concerns if this requirement is not met, and ensuring that all safety protocols are documented and followed. Question 12. Consider a scenario where a construction company has implemented a comprehensive set of safety controls for working at height, including fall arrest systems, safety netting, and strict permit-to-work procedures. The company's safety manager is tasked with evaluating the effectiveness of these controls. Which of the following approaches would best demonstrate compliance with regulatory expectations for monitoring and evaluation of control effectiveness? Option A. Relying on the absence of reported injuries or fatalities related to working at height over the past year as primary evidence of control effectiveness. Option B. Conducting regular site inspections to observe workers using fall arrest systems, verifying the integrity of safety netting, and reviewing permit-to-work documentation for completeness and adherence to procedures, alongside analyzing incident and near-miss data related to working at height. Option C. Reviewing the documented safety procedures for working at height and confirming that all required forms and checklists are present and signed off by supervisors. Option D. Accepting the safety supervisor's verbal assurance that all working at height procedures are being followed correctly and that equipment is in good condition. Correct answer is B. Conducting regular site inspections to observe workers using fall arrest systems, verifying the integrity of safety netting, and reviewing permit-to-work documentation for completeness and adherence to procedures, alongside analyzing incident and near-miss data related to working at height. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in safety management, ensuring that implemented controls are not just in place, but are actively and effectively mitigating identified risks. The professional challenge lies in moving beyond a superficial check of documentation to a genuine assessment of operational effectiveness, which requires a nuanced understanding of both the safety management system and the specific hazards being controlled. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for complacency, where documented procedures might not reflect actual practice, leading to a false sense of security. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based evaluation of control effectiveness. This entails gathering data from multiple sources, including direct observation of work activities, analysis of incident and near-miss reports, review of maintenance logs for safety equipment, and feedback from frontline personnel. This comprehensive method aligns with the principles of a robust safety management system, SMS, as typically outlined in regulatory frameworks, which mandate continuous monitoring and review of safety performance. Specifically, regulations often require organizations to demonstrate that their controls are not only designed appropriately, but are also functioning as intended and achieving the desired risk reduction. This approach ensures that the SMS remains dynamic and responsive to changing operational conditions and emerging risks, fulfilling the ethical obligation to protect workers and the public. An incorrect approach that relies solely on reviewing written procedures and checklists fails to verify actual implementation and effectiveness. This is a regulatory failure because it bypasses the requirement to actively monitor and assess the performance of safety controls in practice. Ethically, it represents a dereliction of duty by not ensuring that workers are genuinely protected. Another incorrect approach, focusing only on the absence of reported incidents, is also flawed. While incident rates are an important indicator, a lack of incidents can be due to luck rather than effective controls, or it could indicate underreporting. This approach misses opportunities to identify latent weaknesses before they manifest as incidents, failing to meet the proactive and preventative spirit of safety regulations. Relying exclusively on management's self-assessment without independent verification is another flawed strategy. This approach lacks objectivity and is susceptible to bias, failing to provide the independent assurance that regulatory frameworks typically require for critical safety functions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to monitoring and evaluation. This begins with clearly defining what constitutes effective for each control based on risk assessments and regulatory requirements. Then, a plan for data collection should be developed, incorporating a mix of qualitative and quantitative methods. This plan should include regular, scheduled reviews as well as ad hoc investigations triggered by specific events or concerns. Crucially, the process must involve feedback loops to ensure that findings lead to corrective actions and improvements in the SMS. Professionals must maintain a critical and objective stance, always seeking evidence to support conclusions about control effectiveness, rather than relying on assumptions or anecdotal information. Question 13. Benchmark analysis indicates that a recent amendment to the Safety Management System, SMS, regulations has introduced ambiguity regarding the frequency of a specific hazard assessment. The internal safety team has differing interpretations, with one faction advocating for a more frequent assessment than explicitly stated, citing a precautionary principle, while another faction argues for adhering strictly to the minimum frequency outlined in the text to avoid unnecessary resource allocation. As the SMS, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance and maintain an effective safety management system? Option A. Implement the more frequent hazard assessment as advocated by the precautionary principle faction, assuming this will satisfy any potential regulatory scrutiny. Option B. Develop an internal policy that mandates the more frequent assessment without consulting the regulatory authority to preemptively address potential future changes. Option C. Adhere strictly to the minimum frequency outlined in the regulation, as this represents the explicit legal requirement and avoids additional operational costs. Option D. Initiate a formal request for clarification from the relevant regulatory authority to obtain a definitive interpretation of the amended regulation. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal request for clarification from the relevant regulatory authority to obtain a definitive interpretation of the amended regulation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a safety management specialist, SMS, to navigate conflicting interpretations of regulatory requirements while ensuring the organization's safety management system, SMS, remains compliant and effective. The core challenge lies in balancing the need for robust safety processes with the practicalities of implementation and the potential for differing interpretations of the same regulatory text. Careful judgment is required to avoid both overcompliance that could lead to inefficiency and undercompliance that could result in safety failures and regulatory penalties. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the specific regulatory text, consulting relevant guidance documents, and engaging with the relevant regulatory authority for clarification. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the ambiguity by seeking definitive interpretation from the source of the regulation. It prioritizes understanding the regulator's intent and expectations, which is paramount for ensuring true compliance. This proactive engagement demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to meeting the spirit and letter of the law, thereby safeguarding the organization and its personnel. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on internal policy without seeking external clarification fails to address the root of the ambiguity. This is a regulatory failure because it assumes an interpretation that may not align with the regulator's expectations, potentially leading to noncompliance. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost saving over regulatory clarity is ethically and regulatorily unsound. Safety regulations are designed to protect life and prevent harm. Prioritizing financial considerations over compliance with these fundamental requirements is a severe ethical breach and a direct violation of regulatory intent. Finally, an approach that adopts the most stringent interpretation without understanding if it is mandated by the regulation risks creating an unnecessarily burdensome and potentially inefficient safety system, which, while seemingly safe, may not be the required or most effective use of resources. This can also lead to resistance from operational staff, undermining the overall effectiveness of the SMS. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the specific regulatory requirement and any perceived ambiguity. This should be followed by a diligent review of all available official guidance. If ambiguity persists, the next critical step is to seek clarification directly from the relevant regulatory body. This ensures that the chosen course of action is aligned with regulatory expectations. Documenting all steps taken, including communications with the regulator, is essential for demonstrating due diligence and providing a clear audit trail. Question 14. Quality control measures reveal that a newly implemented process, intended to increase efficiency, is exposing workers to a previously unidentified airborne particulate matter exceeding recommended exposure limits, as outlined in ILO Convention No. 170 concerning chemicals and ILO Recommendation No. 171 concerning safety in the use of chemicals at work. The production manager is concerned about meeting quarterly targets and suggests continuing operations while a review is conducted, arguing that the exposure levels are only slightly above the limits and that a full shutdown would be disruptive. As the safety management specialist, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Document the findings and recommend a review of existing personal protective equipment, PPE, protocols to ensure they are adequate for the new exposure levels without immediately stopping production. Option B. Inform the production manager of the serious risks and insist on an immediate halt to operations, emphasizing the employer's duty of care under ILO Convention No. 155 and the right of workers to a safe environment. Option C. Continue operations at a reduced pace while initiating a review of the process, with the aim of implementing controls after the current production targets are met. Option D. Immediately halt the operation until the source of the particulate matter is identified and controlled, and conduct a thorough risk assessment in line with ILO Convention No. 155 and Recommendation No. 164. The correct answer is D. Immediately halt the operation until the source of the particulate matter is identified and controlled, and conduct a thorough risk assessment in line with ILO Convention No. 155 and Recommendation No. 164. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational pressures with long-term ethical and legal obligations concerning worker safety and well-being, as mandated by international labor standards. The safety management specialist must navigate a situation where a perceived shortcut could lead to significant harm and regulatory noncompliance. Careful judgment is required to uphold the principles of decent work and occupational safety and health, which are foundational to the ILO's framework. The correct approach involves prioritizing the immediate cessation of the hazardous operation and initiating a thorough investigation, aligning with the principles of ILO Convention No. 155 on occupational safety and health and its accompanying Recommendation No. 164. This approach upholds the employer's fundamental duty to provide a safe working environment and the worker's right to refuse unsafe work, as enshrined in these ILO instruments. It demonstrates a commitment to proactive risk management and a culture of safety, ensuring that identified hazards are addressed systematically before further harm can occur. An incorrect approach that involves continuing operations while initiating a review, despite the clear evidence of immediate risk, fails to adequately protect workers. This directly contravenes the precautionary principle inherent in ILO standards, which advocates for taking preventive action in the face of potential harm, even if full scientific certainty is lacking. It also undermines the spirit of ILO Convention No. 187 on the promotional framework for occupational safety and health, which emphasizes the continuous improvement of national safety and health systems. Another incorrect approach, which is to address the issue only after the current production targets are met, prioritizes economic expediency over human safety. This is a clear ethical failure and a violation of the fundamental principles of ILO conventions, which place the protection of workers' lives and health above all other considerations. Such a delay could lead to severe injuries or fatalities, resulting in significant reputational damage, legal liabilities, and a breakdown of trust between management and employees. A further incorrect approach, which is to downplay the findings and rely on existing, potentially outdated safety protocols without a specific review, ignores the proactive nature of modern safety management systems. ILO Recommendation No. 164 stresses the importance of regular review and updating of safety measures based on new knowledge and emerging risks. Relying on existing protocols without verification in the face of new evidence demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adapt to evolving safety requirements. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear hierarchy of priorities. Worker safety is paramount. Upon identification of a significant hazard, the immediate steps should be to isolate the risk, cease hazardous operations if necessary, and then conduct a comprehensive investigation. This investigation should be guided by ILO principles, ensuring worker participation and a focus on root cause analysis. The findings should then inform corrective and preventive actions, with a commitment to continuous improvement and adherence to international labor standards. Question 15. The assessment process reveals that following a significant workplace incident, the Safety Management Specialist, SMS, is tasked with leading the investigation. However, the company's senior management suggests that the production manager, whose department was directly involved, should take the lead, with the SMS providing support. Several health and safety representatives have also expressed concerns about the impartiality of the investigation if it is solely managed by the department involved. Considering the SMS's role and responsibilities under OHS laws, which approach to leading the investigation is most appropriate? Option A. The SMS should primarily focus on gathering technical evidence related to the incident, leaving the coordination of stakeholder involvement to the production manager. Option B. The SMS should defer to senior management's suggestion and support the production manager's lead in the investigation, focusing on documenting the incident as directed. Option C. The SMS should allow the health and safety representatives to lead the investigation, as they have expressed concerns about impartiality, and provide them with any requested support. Option D. The SMS should assert their responsibility to lead the investigation, ensuring all legally mandated parties are involved and their specific roles are clearly defined and executed, while facilitating an impartial process. The correct answer is D. The SMS should assert their responsibility to lead the investigation, ensuring all legally mandated parties are involved and their specific roles are clearly defined and executed, while facilitating an impartial process. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in safety management: the ambiguity of roles and responsibilities when multiple stakeholders are involved in a safety incident investigation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a safety management specialist, SMS, to navigate potential conflicts of interest, differing levels of authority, and varying interpretations of legal obligations. Careful judgment is required to ensure the investigation is thorough, impartial, and compliant with all applicable OHS laws, thereby preventing future incidents and protecting both workers and the organization. The correct approach involves the SMS taking a lead role in coordinating the investigation, ensuring all legally mandated parties are involved, and their specific responsibilities under OHS laws are clearly defined and executed. This includes facilitating communication, gathering evidence impartially, and ensuring the investigation adheres to the principles of natural justice and due process as outlined in relevant OHS legislation. The SMS must act as an objective facilitator, ensuring that the investigation focuses on identifying root causes and implementing effective corrective actions, rather than assigning blame prematurely or overlooking critical safety failures. This aligns with the overarching duty of care placed upon employers and their representatives under OHS laws to provide a safe and healthy working environment. An incorrect approach would be for the SMS to defer primary responsibility for the investigation to a department with a potential conflict of interest, such as production management, without clear oversight or defined roles for other stakeholders. This fails to uphold the SMS's professional duty to ensure an independent and thorough investigation, potentially leading to a compromised outcome that does not adequately address safety deficiencies. Such a failure could contravene specific provisions in OHS legislation that mandate impartial incident investigation and reporting. Another incorrect approach would be for the SMS to focus solely on documenting the incident without actively ensuring that all legally required parties, such as health and safety representatives or relevant regulatory bodies, are appropriately engaged and their roles understood. This reactive stance neglects the proactive responsibility of the SMS to facilitate a comprehensive investigation that meets all legal requirements and contributes to a robust safety management system. A third incorrect approach would be for the SMS to allow the investigation to be dominated by one stakeholder's perspective, neglecting the input and responsibilities of others, such as frontline workers or their representatives. This can lead to a biased investigation that fails to uncover all contributing factors and therefore cannot lead to effective preventative measures, potentially violating the spirit and letter of OHS laws that emphasize worker participation in safety matters. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Immediately identifying all relevant stakeholders and their statutory rights and responsibilities under OHS laws. 2. Establishing a clear investigation plan that outlines roles, timelines, and reporting structures. 3. acting as an impartial facilitator, ensuring all voices are heard and evidence is gathered objectively. 4. Documenting all actions and decisions meticulously. 5. Seeking legal or expert advice if jurisdictional ambiguities or complex legal interpretations arise. Question 16. The audit findings indicate a perception among employees that senior management's commitment to safety is inconsistent, leading to a disconnect between stated safety policies and day-to-day operational practices. As the safety management specialist, SMS, which of the following actions would be the most effective in addressing this leadership and commitment gap? Option A. Organize a series of workshops for all employees to reinforce safety procedures and reporting mechanisms. Option B. Delegate the task of improving leadership commitment to safety to the departmental safety officers, providing them with the audit report for their action. Option C. Facilitate a strategic session with senior management to collaboratively define measurable safety objectives, integrate them into business goals, and establish a clear communication plan for their visible endorsement. Option D. Develop a comprehensive report detailing the audit findings and recommend immediate disciplinary actions for any identified safety breaches. The correct answer is A. Organize a series of workshops for all employees to reinforce safety procedures and reporting mechanisms. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a systemic issue in how leadership commitment to safety is perceived and demonstrated within the organization. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the safety management specialist, SMS, to move beyond simply identifying the problem to actively influencing leadership behavior and embedding safety as a core value, rather than a mere compliance exercise. The effectiveness of the safety management system, SMS, hinges on visible and active leadership commitment, as mandated by regulatory frameworks. The correct approach involves the SMS facilitating a structured dialogue with senior management to collaboratively develop and communicate clear, actionable safety objectives that are integrated into the overall business strategy. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the root cause of the audit findings by ensuring leadership understands their role in setting the safety tone and direction. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing workplace safety, consistently emphasize the critical role of top management in establishing and maintaining a safety culture. This proactive engagement ensures that safety is not an afterthought but a fundamental aspect of decision-making and resource allocation, thereby fostering a robust safety management system. An incorrect approach would be to simply present the audit findings to senior management without offering concrete solutions or a pathway for improvement. This fails to demonstrate leadership in the SMS role and places the onus of problem-solving entirely on management without adequate support or guidance, potentially leading to superficial changes or a lack of sustained commitment. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on updating safety procedures and documentation without addressing the underlying leadership commitment. While documentation is important, it cannot compensate for a lack of genuine buy-in and visible support from the top, which is essential for the effective implementation and adherence to safety protocols. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the responsibility for improving leadership commitment to lower levels of management without direct senior leadership involvement. This dilutes accountability and fails to establish the necessary organizational priority for safety, undermining the very foundation of a strong safety culture. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly analyzing the audit findings to understand the specific manifestations of leadership's perceived lack of commitment. This analysis should then inform a strategy to engage senior leadership constructively, highlighting the business benefits of strong safety performance alongside regulatory obligations. The decision-making process should prioritize collaborative problem-solving, clear communication of expectations, and the establishment of measurable safety objectives that are championed by leadership. Question 17. Compliance review shows a pattern of minor but recurring incidents related to a specific ground handling procedure. Despite previous ad hoc corrective actions, including brief refresher training for the involved personnel, the incidents continue to occur at a similar frequency. What is the most appropriate next step for the safety management specialist to ensure effective safety improvement? Option A. Initiate a formal investigation to identify the root cause of the recurring incidents and implement comprehensive corrective and preventive actions based on the findings. Option B. temporarily suspend the procedure until a full review can be conducted, potentially impacting operational schedules. Option C. Implement a mandatory one-off intensive retraining program for all ground handling personnel, assuming the issue is solely human error. Option D. Conclude that the incidents are minor and acceptable risks, and focus resources on more significant safety concerns. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal investigation to identify the root cause of the recurring incidents and implement comprehensive corrective and preventive actions based on the findings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the safety management specialist, SMS, to balance the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term imperative of safety improvement, as mandated by regulatory frameworks. The pressure to maintain productivity can create a conflict with the resources and time needed for thorough root cause analysis and effective corrective actions. The SMS must exercise sound professional judgment to ensure that safety is not compromised for short-term gains, adhering strictly to the principles of continuous improvement embedded in safety management systems. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation to identify the root cause of the recurring incidents and implementing sustainable corrective and preventive actions. This aligns directly with the principles of a robust safety management system, SMS, as outlined in relevant aviation safety regulations, e.g., ICAO Annex 19 FA Part 5, ESA Part 13. The regulatory framework emphasizes a proactive and systematic approach to safety, requiring organizations to identify hazards, assess risks, and implement controls to prevent accidents and incidents. A thorough root cause analysis ensures that the underlying systemic issues are addressed, rather than just the superficial symptoms, leading to genuine and lasting safety improvements. This approach also fosters a culture of learning and continuous improvement, which is a cornerstone of effective safety management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves dismissing the incidents as isolated events and relying solely on superficial fixes like retraining. This fails to address the potential systemic issues that may be contributing to the recurring nature of the incidents. Regulatory frameworks require a deeper dive than mere retraining when incidents become recurrent, as it suggests a flaw in the system, procedures, or training content itself. Ethically, this approach neglects the duty of care to prevent foreseeable harm. Another incorrect approach is to implement corrective actions without a thorough root cause analysis. This is akin to treating the symptoms without understanding the disease. While some immediate improvement might be observed, the underlying causes remain unaddressed, making future incidents likely. This approach is contrary to the systematic risk management requirements of safety regulation, which mandate understanding the why behind an event to prevent recurrence. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize operational expediency over a comprehensive investigation, opting for quick fixes that do not fully mitigate the identified risks. This demonstrates a failure to uphold the primary objective of the SMS, which is to ensure the highest level of safety. Regulatory bodies expect organizations to dedicate adequate resources and time to safety investigations, even if it causes temporary operational disruption. Prioritizing expediency over thoroughness can lead to regulatory noncompliance and a compromised safety culture. Professional reasoning. Professionals in SMS roles should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, acknowledge the recurring nature of the incidents as a significant safety concern requiring immediate attention. Second, initiate a formal investigation process to identify the root cause, utilizing appropriate analytical tools and methodologies. Third, develop and implement corrective and preventive actions that are proportionate to the identified risks and address the root causes. Fourth, monitor the effectiveness of these actions and be prepared to revise them if necessary. This iterative process ensures continuous improvement and compliance with regulatory expectations for proactive safety management. Question 18. The evaluation methodology shows that worker participation in the safety management system is being assessed. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates a comprehensive and effective evaluation of worker participation's impact on safety outcomes? Option A. Measuring the percentage of safety training modules completed by all employees and the number of safety-related queries resolved by the safety department. Option B. Analyzing the frequency of worker attendance at safety committee meetings and the total number of safety suggestions submitted by employees over the past year. Option C. relying on the safety manager's subjective assessment of how engaged workers appear during safety briefings and the perceived willingness of employees to report minor safety concerns. Option D. Reviewing documented instances where worker feedback directly led to the modification of safety procedures, the identification of new hazards, or the enhancement of existing control measures, alongside an assessment of worker perception of their influence. The correct answer is B. Analyzing the frequency of worker attendance at safety committee meetings and the total number of safety suggestions submitted by employees over the past year. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a safety management specialist, SMS, to assess the effectiveness of worker participation in a safety management system, core component of many regulatory frameworks designed to ensure a proactive and inclusive approach to workplace safety. The challenge lies in moving beyond mere procedural compliance to evaluating the genuine impact and quality of worker input on safety outcomes. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between superficial engagement and meaningful contribution that influences risk assessment, control measure implementation, and continuous improvement. The correct approach involves a qualitative and quantitative assessment of how worker feedback, insights, and concerns have demonstrably influenced safety decisions and outcomes. This includes reviewing documented instances where worker input led to changes in procedures, the identification of previously unrecognized hazards, or the improvement of existing safety controls. This approach aligns with the principles of effective safety management systems, which emphasize the importance of worker involvement in identifying hazards, assessing risks, and developing and implementing control measures. Regulatory frameworks often mandate or strongly encourage worker participation, recognizing that those closest to the work often have the most practical understanding of risks and potential solutions. Ethically, it upholds the principle of respecting workers' rights and contributions to their own safety and that of their colleagues. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the number of safety meetings attended by workers or the volume of suggestions submitted without assessing their impact is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the spirit and intent of worker participation requirements, which are geared towards achieving tangible safety improvements, not just ticking boxes. Such an approach overlooks the qualitative aspect of participation, where the depth and relevance of input are crucial. It also risks creating a perception that management is not genuinely interested in worker contributions beyond superficial engagement, potentially leading to disengagement and a decline in overall safety culture. Another incorrect approach that relies exclusively on management's perception of worker engagement without seeking direct worker feedback or corroborating evidence is also professionally flawed. This approach is inherently biased and fails to provide an objective assessment of worker participation. It neglects the fundamental principle that effective worker participation requires direct channels for workers to voice their opinions and concerns, and for these to be demonstrably considered. Ethically, it undermines trust and transparency within the workplace. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multifaceted approach. First, clearly define what constitutes meaningful worker participation within the specific organizational context and in alignment with relevant regulations. Second, employ a mix of qualitative and quantitative methods to gather evidence, including reviewing safety records, incident reports, meeting minutes, feedback forms, and conducting interviews or surveys with workers and supervisors. Third, analyze the evidence to determine the actual influence of worker participation on safety performance and the effectiveness of safety management systems. Finally, use these findings to identify areas for improvement in worker engagement strategies and to report on the effectiveness of the safety management system. Question 19. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent, albeit minor, deviation from a specified operational parameter. The deviation has been observed intermittently over the past 3 operational cycles, with each instance falling below the threshold that would typically trigger an immediate, mandatory reportable incident under the organization's internal safety policy. However, the SMS is aware that the underlying regulation may have broader reporting or corrective action requirements for recurring deviations, even if individually minor. What is the most appropriate course of action for the safety management specialist, strictly adhering to the legal and regulatory frameworks governing the operation? Option A. Document the deviations internally and monitor them for a longer period to see if they escalate into a more significant, clearly reportable incident before engaging with the regulator. Option B. Rely on the internal safety policy's threshold for reportable incidents and take no further action, as each individual deviation has been below this internal trigger. Option C. Conduct a detailed review of the applicable regulatory framework to determine if the recurring minor deviations, individually or collectively, trigger any specific reporting obligations or necessitate specific corrective actions beyond the internal policy. Option D. Immediately implement significant, costly corrective actions to eliminate the deviation entirely, assuming the regulation will likely require this for any recurring issue. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed review of the applicable regulatory framework to determine if the recurring minor deviations, individually or collectively, trigger any specific reporting obligations or necessitate specific corrective actions beyond the internal policy. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the safety management specialist, SMS, to interpret and apply the relevant legal and regulatory frameworks to a specific operational finding. The challenge lies in identifying the precise regulatory obligations and determining the appropriate course of action based on those obligations, rather than on assumptions or generalized safety principles. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance and prevent potential legal ramifications or safety breaches. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicable regulatory framework to identify specific requirements related to the observed deviation. This approach is right because it grounds the response in established legal and ethical obligations. The SMS must consult the relevant legislation and guidance documents to understand the reporting thresholds, corrective action requirements, and potential penalties associated with the identified issue. This ensures that the response is not only effective in mitigating risk, but also legally sound and compliant with the Safety Management System, SMS, requirements mandated by the regulatory body. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the finding due to its perceived minor nature without consulting the regulatory framework. This fails to acknowledge that regulations often define specific thresholds for reporting and action, regardless of subjective assessments of severity. Regulatory framework is the ultimate arbiter of compliance, and ignoring its dictates, even for seemingly minor issues, constitutes a regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach would be to implement corrective actions based solely on industry best practices or internal company policy, without verifying that these actions fully satisfy the explicit requirements of the governing regulations. While best practices are valuable, they do not supersede legal obligations. Failure to align actions with the regulatory framework can lead to noncompliance, even if the intent is to improve safety. A further incorrect approach would be to delay reporting or action until a pattern of similar incidents emerges. Regulations often mandate timely reporting of specific events or deviations, and waiting for a trend can result in a violation for delayed or noncompliance. The professional reasoning process should involve 1. Identifying the specific operational finding. 2. Consulting the primary legal and regulatory framework applicable to the operation. 3. Determining the specific obligations and thresholds outlined in that framework. 4. Implementing actions that demonstrably meet those regulatory requirements. 5. Documenting the entire process, including the regulatory basis for the actions taken. Question 20. The audit findings indicate that a chemical used in a manufacturing process presents a significant inhalation hazard. While current safety protocols include mandatory use of respirators and regular air quality monitoring, the audit suggests these measures may not fully mitigate the long-term health risks to employees. Considering the principles of the hierarchy of controls, which of the following represents the most effective and professionally responsible course of action for the safety management specialist? Option A. Increase the frequency of air quality monitoring and implement more rigorous training programs on the correct use and maintenance of respirators. Option B. Develop a comprehensive communication campaign to reinforce the importance of adhering to existing safety procedures and the proper use of PPE. Option C. Investigate the feasibility of substituting the hazardous chemical with a less toxic alternative or redesigning the process to eliminate its use entirely. Option D. Mandate the use of higher-grade respirators with enhanced filtration capabilities and ensure all employees undergo annual fit testing. The correct answer is C. Investigate the feasibility of substituting the hazardous chemical with a less toxic alternative or redesigning the process to eliminate its use entirely. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a safety management specialist to evaluate the effectiveness of existing control measures against a backdrop of identified hazards and potential noncompliance. The core challenge lies in prioritizing control strategies according to their inherent effectiveness and regulatory mandates, moving beyond superficial fixes to address root causes. Careful judgment is required to ensure that chosen controls are not only compliant, but also demonstrably reduce risk to an acceptable level, aligning with the principles of a robust safety management system. The correct approach involves prioritizing controls that eliminate or substitute the hazard, as these are inherently more effective and align with the highest tiers of the hierarchy of controls. This strategy is ethically sound as it proactively prevents harm rather than relying on human behavior or equipment to mitigate risk. From a regulatory perspective, many frameworks, including those that underpin the Safety Management Specialist (SMS) role, emphasize the preference for eliminating or substituting hazards as the most effective means of ensuring workplace safety. This proactive stance is often a cornerstone of due diligence and a commitment to a safe working environment. An approach that focuses solely on administrative controls, such as enhanced training or revised procedures, is professionally unacceptable because it places a significant burden on human behavior, which is prone to error. While administrative controls have a role, they are less reliable than engineering solutions and do not address the hazard at its source. This can lead to regulatory noncompliance if the controls are deemed insufficient to manage the identified risk. An approach that relies exclusively on personal protective equipment, PPE, is also professionally unacceptable. PPE is considered the least effective control measure because it does not eliminate or reduce the hazard itself, but rather provides a barrier between the worker and the hazard. Its effectiveness is contingent on proper selection, fit, maintenance, and consistent use by all personnel, all of which are subject to human error and potential failure. Over-reliance on PPE can mask underlying systemic issues and may not meet the stringent requirements of many safety regulations for hazard control. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of the identified hazards, followed by an assessment of existing control measures against the hierarchy of controls. The specialist must then identify opportunities to move up the hierarchy, prioritizing elimination and substitution, followed by engineering controls, then administrative controls, and finally PPE as a last resort or supplementary measure. This process should be informed by regulatory requirements, industry best practices, and a thorough risk assessment to ensure that the most effective and sustainable solutions are implemented.